The story happened when I was 21, and I used to go climbing in the mountains during the weekends. By that time, I don't remember anything that I liked more than just climbing. So every weekend, I took my gear and drove up to the mountains about 1 hour away from my home. I also used to take my tent because I loved sleeping in the mountains and coming home the next day. So one Saturday morning, I took my gear and my tent, as usual, and got into my car. When I arrived there, I found my friends and they told me that they didn't feel like climbing as somebody just suffered an accident, and the police were trying to find out how it happened. We didn't go back to the city. We stood there by the mountainside in the camping site. It was something like a farm, but not really. It was a large extension of land with one small house, if you could say, in the middle of it. And by house, I mean that it was just a room, and there was only a table and a kitchen for us to prepare a not-so-fancy meal. After talking for a while, showing tricks, setting the tent, and having dinner, we didn't really drink as we were going to climb the next morning at 6 a.m. We all went to sleep. At 4 a.m. or something like that, I felt the need to go to the bathroom. I thought of the possibility of holding it until there was light outside, but that couldn't be done. I took my flashlight and went out. At one end of the land, there was bathrooms. They were far away from the camping site, so I started singing a song to myself to soothe me. You could easily see the bathrooms from the distance because the lights were on. So when I got there, I got in. Just an FYI, there are no doors on these bathrooms. And there were 8 toilets, but no doors, just a wall separating them. So I went to the very last one figuring that if somebody came in, they wouldn't catch me with my pants down. When I go out of the bathroom, I started walking to my tent. But suddenly there was a sudden breeze accompanied with a woman's sad sigh. I looked back and standing there in the entrance of the bathroom, there was a woman who looked very sad, and she had her eyes on me. I was already at the halfway point between the tent and the bathrooms, but I kept looking at her, mostly because I thought, if I look back, she is going to be standing there for sure. She was just standing there, and I just stood there, looking at her. I didn't know for how long. The thing is, I was really scared, but I have seen these kinds of things a lot. And once it happened to me, I looked back, and that lady was near me. I didn't want that to happen again. I thought seeing her from a distance wouldn't be as bad as if she was standing next to me. I knew everyone in the campsite, and I had been inside the bathroom, so I didn't know where she came out of. After an eternity of just staring at her, she disappeared with a second breeze, and I ran for it. She just faded away, and I ran straight back to my tent. I got into my tent and promised myself I would never drink a lot of water just before going to bed again. We woke up the next morning at about 5:45. Nobody heard anything, saw anything. I thought maybe it was just me being tired, but she was just so real, and she just faded into darkness. Later on, we decided to go ahead and start climbing. It was a very fun day, and I finally started forgetting about it. I was listening to a story, and this popped back in my mind, so I wanted to make sure to share it with you. Tell me what your thoughts are. A couple of summers ago, my girlfriend and I were camping in a national forest in northern Wisconsin. And after our experience, we do not plan on returning unless we are with a large group of people. My girlfriend and I are from Chicago, so northern Wisconsin was our go-to place for R&R. We've done a number of hiking trips in the northern Wisconsin area and in the UP, but never to this area. We are not backpacking experts, but we've been to a number of national parks and have been out hiking and exploring when we can find time away from work. We love getting away from people and relaxing in nature, but this trip made us appreciate the presence of other people around us in unfamiliar places. Our plan was to hike a remote section of the North Country Trail. The North Country Trail is a national scenic trail, like the Appalachian Trail, but it gets much less use. In some parts of northern Wisconsin, the trail is very remote, and the only access is via logging roads. We planned to hike 15 miles along the trail to a backpack shelter and spend the night, and hike back to the car the following day. We spent the night at a friend's house, and we set out early the next day to the trailhead. As we entered the national forest boundary, we were captivated by the beauty and the thick green forests. I drove slowly along the gravel logging road as we made our way to the parking lot. While we were driving to the trailhead, we passed a couple of people standing next to a parked truck on the side of the road. They appeared to be hillbillies, if you could say, as they had a rusted out, dinged up pickup truck, complete with the Confederate bumper stickers and everything. As we drove past, I waved, and they just stared back without returning the greeting. Friendly people, I thought to myself. After we passed them, I looked in the rearview mirror and noticed they were still staring at us. Before we rounded a bend, I glanced back into the mirror again, and I saw them watching us through a haze of road dust. My girlfriend and I were just joking about the up north people, but we did not think anything of that encounter. We found the trailhead about 15 minutes later, after winding our way on the narrow logging road. There was no one else parked on the trailhead, a perfect chance to get some needed solitude, fresh air, and relaxation. After parking and making sure the car was locked, we hoisted our packs and set off on the trail. The weather was relatively cool, which thankfully kept the mosquitoes and biting flies at bay. We took pictures along the way, and we marveled at the lusciousness of the forest and the topography of the glacial moraine. After a solid 8 hours of hiking, we found ourselves a campsite. It consisted of a wooden backpack shelter and a fire ring. Even though the shelter provided ample space for us, we opted to set up a tent in a small clearing about 100 feet behind the shelter. We built a fire at the shelter fire ring, and I boiled some water for our dehydrated trail food. As we ate, we watched the sky slowly turn dark. My girlfriend and I passed around a Nalgene filled with wine, and we marveled at how many stars you could see away from the city. When the fire reduced to a small pile of glowing embers, we decided to head back to the tent. We settled into our tent and looked through the pictures that we took that day. But after lugging a heavy pack for 15 miles and drinking some wine, I was ready for some shut-eye. When we camped at state and national parks, I usually wore earplugs. But that night, there were no RVs or other campers to make a noise. So I closed my eyes and let the noise of the forest lull me into my sleep. My girlfriend was very uneasy that night, but she normally had apprehension whenever we were sleeping away from the home. I'm not sure when we drifted to sleep, but we awoke to a bone-chilling noise. It was pitch dark outside, and over the insects in the forest, I heard a dull thud. It sounded like someone was hitting two logs together. My girlfriend and I were wide awake at this point, and we lay silent in our tent, hearing the noise again. Our old tent had mesh windows, but the backpacking tent that we brought had no windows. We could only guess at what was making that noise outside of our tent. We initially thought that an animal had gotten to our food, or the garbage bag, which we left in the shelter. But the noise was too distinct, and it did not sound like rustling through the food wrappers or our camp equipment. Our hearts were pounding as we heard the persistent knock in the darkness. Unarmed and scared shitless, we did not know what to do. I would normally have carried my can of bear spray, but I decided to leave it at home to save on some weight, against the wishes of my girlfriend. The knocking continued and we remained still, as to not give away our location. For all we knew, whatever was making that noise had already spotted our tent. After what seemed to be an eternity, the knocking sound ceased. We lay in the complete silence, with only dull buzz from the insects in the background. Then we heard it. leaves rustling, a branch breaking, and the voices. We heard low talking in the distance. We could not make out what they were saying, but it sounded like a couple of people talking in the distance. The voices continued for a bit, but to our relief, the voices did not seem to get louder. Whoever was out there did not spot our tent, or they just decided to leave us alone. We sat in our tent the rest of the night, adrenaline surging through our veins, and we just sat there. At the first of light, we slowly got out of the tent. I looked around in all directions to see if anyone was there, but I only saw the forest, and the backpacks, and the shelter. We quickly rolled up our sleeping bags and camping pads and put our tents away. When we got to the shelter, my girlfriend screamed in horror. On the entrance of the shelter, the wood was freshly cut. The word "kill" was cut into the shelter wall, and there was a number of axe and knife cuts where someone was chopping at the wall. I looked at the ground and it was covered with scattered, fresh wood splinters. After grabbing our food supply and garbage bag, we got the hell out of there. We were nearly jogging the entire way back with our gear as we made our way back to the car. I kept glancing back over my shoulder and gazing out through the woods to see if anyone was following us. We traversed the glacial eskers that we saw the day before, and we knew we were getting close to the car. We were quickly rejoiced as we neared the trailhead. We made it back to the trailhead in a near record time, but something was wrong. The windshield wiper on my car was sticking straight up, and there was something stuck on it. As we inched closer to the car, we saw there was blood smeared on the windshield, and I'm not going to tell you what was on the windshield wiper. There was hair and blood still stuck on the wiper and on the hood of the car. I didn't even bother cleaning off the car. We threw our gear in the trunk and we sped off without removing what was on our vehicle. As I sped down the gravel logging road, I kept glancing in my rearview mirror, but I could not see anything through the cloud of dust behind our car. When we got to a gas station by the nearest town, I removed what was on our vehicle with some newspaper, and I tried to remove as much dried blood as I could. I filled up on gas, and we didn't stop until we made it to Milwaukee. This was definitely the last trip I ever took to the woods of northern Wisconsin. A group of friends were staying in a remote cabin that one of my friend's cousins owned. There were no roads leading to this cabin, and it was a good 3/4 day hike from where you park your car. I couldn't go at the same time as everyone else due to work obligations, so I decided to head up there the same day but later. It would mean I would leave and have to camp at night by myself though. The later part of the trail is too dangerous to be taken at night, especially by someone who doesn't know it. I didn't care though. I was kind of looking forward to it as I've never camped alone before. So I was in the middle of these woods when the sun went down. I got my camp set up in this little clearing, probably 40 feet across if I had to guess. I get my campfire going and pitch my small one-person tent. I do all that camping stuff, like cooking hot dogs on a stick over the fire and some s'mores. I probably stay up for a good 2 or 3 hours after dark. It was mid-autumn, so the days were kind of short. The entire time I thought I was hearing stuff moving in the woods on the edge of the clearing. I didn't really think anything of it at first because the woods are full of animals. But as the night went on, I realized whatever it was just circling the clearing over and over. Once I started paying attention to it, it made about 4 or 5 laps around before I decided to get up and investigate. The noise stopped as soon as I stood up, and I thought I heard something or someone going away through the woods. I just shrugged it off, thinking it was just a fox that was just curious and got scared when I stood up. I decided it's time for sleep. I doused the fire and I climbed into my tent. I started to doze off and stay in a half-sleep, half-awake state for a while. I normally hear weird shit when I'm in that state, so I don't think much of when I hear a voice. Something wakes me all the way up though, and I realize that this voice is real and right outside of my tent. It's just above a whisper, and I'm not sure if it was another language, or if they were speaking English in such a way that I just couldn't understand. I lay there for some time. I don't know how long, listening and waiting for something to happen. There is just enough moonlight to light up the walls of the tent, so I can see the hands pressed into the wall of my tent down near my foot. This freaks me out, and I sit up quickly. Whoever was outside of my tent tore ass out of there, like running full sprint through the woods. I get out of my tent and I shine a flashlight around and see nothing. I was expecting there to be like bloody handprints on the tent, but nope. Didn't sleep that night. Packed up my camp at first light that morning, and I booked it to the cabin. There was a group of teens that hadn't been heard from after their scheduled return time for a camping trip. A coworker and I head out into the general direction of the teens. We'd been hiking for almost a day and have seen nothing. We're about 35 kilometers into the woods at this point when we start noticing odd things. Sticks carved like spears into the ground. Weird carvings in the trees. A child's stuffed animal hanging from a noose up in a tree. This place was nowhere near any roads. It wasn't on the regular trails people would usually take in this area. The really eerie thing was that everything was freshly carved. Somebody had been there within the last couple hours of us and made these things. Mind you, we're still looking for these teens. We kept on hiking and eventually made camp for the night, still kind of on edge from what we had seen, but we settled down anyway to go to sleep. We get up with the sunrise, hoping to cover more ground before it gets too hot. We pack up the gear and get ready to go, when I notice a bit of a shirt. It was caught on a small tree and ripped along with some shoe prints. We were thinking, great, maybe we're getting close to these teens. But that's when we got a radio call. The teens had just been found 20 kilometers east of us, and they're calling everybody back now. All those weird things that we had seen the day before came flooding back into my mind, and we wasted no time hiking out of those woods. And still to this day, it still gives me chills. I would like to know who put those there. Now, before you exit the video, I wanted to say hello and welcome to everybody that has joined our community. We have jumped drastically. Like, it's insane. I wanted to say hello to all of you, and I'm glad that you're here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to comment down in the comment section. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not already part of this channel, I'm telling you, we're blowing up. Make sure to turn on those post notifications so you get the videos as soon as they come out. Make sure to check out the links to the description, my Twitter, Instagram, everything like that's in there. If you enjoyed these types of stories, make sure to let me know in the comments. But with that being said, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one. By the way, I usually add something at the very end, so here it is.